Charles Oliveira defeated Beneil Dariush with this perfectly placed little punch, and in this video, we're going to take a look at the anatomy and science behind this victory. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and my goal in this channel is to help teach you about the medical side of the sports world. So if that kind of thing interests you, then please consider subscribing to help support the channel. First, I want to highlight some of the functional anatomy of how Oliveira delivered this punch, because while it technically wasn't one single punch knockout, it really was this blow that really wobbled Dariush and resulted in the whole finishing sequence. So let's start off with talking about some of the anatomy that we're seeing here, and then we'll talk about a little bit of fight physics. Starting off in this position here, focus on Oliveira's right arm. If we think of this as sort of the natural plane of his shoulders, his humerus right here is backwards behind that neutral plane of his shoulder. And so his humerus is going to be in what we would call an extended position. With the humerus of the arm in front of you, that's going to be flexion, and with it going backwards behind him, that's going to be extension. Now with the arm swung up out to the side this way, that's going to be abduction with a B. So a abduction is when something goes away from the midline or up and out. A deduction, adduction, is when something comes back in towards the midline. So here, Oliveira's right arm is abducted, meaning it's lifted out away from his body with a little bit of going backwards, humeral extension. Now, if we look out at his elbow is going to be in an extended position, meaning out straight. Elbow flexion is when the elbow is flexed upward, kind of bent towards you. Elbow extension is when we're straightened outwards. So here in this position, we've got some humeral abduction, we've got a little bit of humeral extension, and we've got that elbow extension. What that's going to do is it's going to set up this kind of rotational inertial body, this kind of rotational vector here of when Oliveira comes through to deliver this punch, that's going to put all that energy behind it to ultimately deliver this knockout leading blow. And we'll talk about those physics parts in a little bit, but how does he functionally cause that motion to occur? Well, to go from this position where he's humerally extended and abducted, he stays in that abducted plane as he's coming upwards, but he goes forward with that arm. That motion of coming forward with his arm is going to be activated by primarily the pectoralis major muscles in the front of the chest. So this almost mimics like a butterfly machine, right? Where you're sitting there on a pec fly deck machine and you're swinging your arms forward. That's going to be a little bit more, kind of depending on which plane you look at, a little bit of bringing that humerus more forward when you come across then to midline, a little bit of more humeral adduction, bringing it back across. So that's going to be a lot of pectoralis muscle to bring that arm, swing it back across as he connects then with Dariush's lower jaw. Notice how there's not really too much rotation in Oliveira's torso. When I first looked at this, I almost wondered if there was going to be a lot of rotation this way, but Oliveira's upper body and trunk actually stay pretty stationary with just that pure kind of pec muscle firing to bring that arm across and continue that rotational inertia to loop that punch around from the side. We'll correlate that with our anatomy model and talk about some brief physics, but first I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video. Huge thank you to Birch for sponsoring this video. I was super excited to partner with Birch for this video because Birch Living makes mattresses and sleep products that are extremely comfortable, but also really environmentally and eco-conscious. It was really easy to get started because Birch ships your mattress straight to your front door, and then you've got a 100-night sleep trial and a 25-year warranty. The unboxing and setup process was an absolute breeze and piece of cake. Once you get it unwrapped, just position it on your bed frame, and then before you know it, it's going to have expanded and be all set to go. You can easily do it by yourself, but it's nice to have a little bit of help along the way. It was important for me to choose a Birch mattress as it's made with organic and natural materials because I have really sensitive allergies, and these Birch mattresses, being made of natural products, are very allergen and mildew resistant and hypoallergenic. I love my Birch mattress, and I think you will too. And if you're looking for a new mattress right now, head to birchliving.com/Brian Sutterer to get 20% off your mattress plus 2 free pillows. Click the link down below. It's super easy to get a great mattress that's environmentally friendly and it's gonna help you sleep better. They also have their Birch Kids line if you're looking for a mattress for a little one. It's free from harmful chemicals, and right as I got it set up, I immediately noticed there was no chemically nasty odor coming from it, just a nice, natural, clean smell. I've had my Birch mattress for a few months now, and I love that peace of mind going to bed on something that's 100% toxin-free and environmentally friendly. So start getting a better night's sleep and do it on something that you can have that peace of mind that's gonna be environmentally friendly and free of all those nasty, harsh chemicals. Thank you again to Birch for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to our learning. So now if we look at our anatomy model here, I've highlighted the muscles of the right upper limb, or kind of the chest and the shoulder. So here highlighted is going to be the pectoralis muscle. And if we think about this arm right now is at the side, but if we swing that arm back up this way into that position where Oliveira is kind of winded up behind him, that's going to tension, that's going to stretch this pec muscle right here. So then when you pull the pec muscle back forward, this pec muscle firing is what's going to bring that arm back across in front of you, and you can even feel it on yourself. When you go from out here where Oliveira is, swing that arm back across, you're gonna feel this tensioning, this tightness in the front of your chest. That's your pec muscle firing to bring that arm back across. Now the rest of these muscles aren't highlighted as importantly, but they're really crucial when we talk about transfer of energy, transfer of this force, this momentum that Oliveira has from this punch. All of these muscles need to fire to stabilize the rest of this arm to almost make it like you're swinging a hammer across. You don't want to be swinging a floppy, loose noodle, because whenever that noodle strikes and makes contact, it's not going to be able to effectively transfer its momentum, transfer its energy to the target. So all of these muscles, from the deltoid up in the shoulder down to the biceps, to the triceps, to these muscles in the forearm and the wrist, need to be firing in an isometric fashion, meaning their length is not changing, to help stabilize that arm to effectively deliver the energy at the end of the punch. If we go back to that position here, let's talk a little bit about the physics of this. Now, remember that this arm is rotating, right? The trunk of Oliveira is staying fairly stationary, and this right is going to be looping and rotating up around an axis straight down through Oliveira. So if we look top down, you would see something like a central point here in the middle, and then that arm is going to be rotating around this way before ultimately striking Dariush's chin right here. So that means we're going to have something we call angular momentum. Now, momentum is the tendency of a moving object to stay in motion until it's acted on by an external force. Momentum in just a straight line is a function of the mass, or basically the bulk or size of something, times the velocity, or how fast it's moving. So a bigger object or a faster moving object has more momentum, and that means it's harder to slow down. If an object with a lot of momentum hits something, transfers a lot of momentum and energy into that object, and you're going to result in a bigger punch or a more likely knockout. Here with Oliveira, it's momentum, but it's angular because it's rotating around this central fixed point. And this angular momentum is a function of the mass and the speed. So in this case, the mass out at the end of that radius, but then how long that radius, that arm is that it's rotating about. So Oliveira has long arms, right? And the longer he's able to get that arm out to the side, the more he's able to get out into that elbow extended position. That increases that radius, that increases the length that you're rotating around, and therefore increases the angular momentum. So during this throw, the fact that he's able to get his arm out so wide and loop this around so effectively with that arm straight increases the angular momentum of his fist when it makes contact with Dariush's jaw. That higher angular momentum, because of that longer radius of the long arm, is going to transfer more energy into Dariush's chin, resulting in more likely of a knockout. If this had been repeated, but Oliveira's arm was half the length but moving at the same speed, it would have roughly exactly half the momentum and not deliver as much energy. So here, Oliveira having his arm all the way out, nice and extended, big long radius, increases that angular momentum, increasing the power behind this punch. I mentioned the one thing that could have made this an even more significant blow, the fact that whenever contact comes in, you see things kind of crumple a little bit in Oliveira's arm. You see we lose a little bit of that elbow extension. His wrist tends to go down a little bit into what we would call some ulnar deviation. And because there's some movement in Oliveira's hand, some of the energy is going to be lost in Oliveira's side of this as opposed to transferring all of it directly into Dariush. If Oliveira would have been able to keep his fist perfectly solid, perfectly straight, then nothing's moving. You're not losing any momentum or energy in Oliveira's fist. All of it's being transferred into Dariush. So the fact that there was a little bit of that kind of looseness in Oliveira's wrist made this a less significant punch, and honestly, if that hadn't happened, might have been a one-hit knockout where we would have seen Dariush go completely down and not even be able to fight through it a little bit. But that's going to be really, really hard to do though, because like I said, it seems like this punch from Oliveira actually first hits the lower portion, kind of the pinky, the fourth and fifth digit, hit the upper sternum, the upper breastbone of Dariush, and then kind of glances upwards. And so that is going to grab Oliveira's lower wrist and then send it into that ulnar deviation. So I think this was just the placement of the punch was a little bit off. not so much him being able to maintain the resistance within that arm. And that's kind of what I talked about earlier with that. You don't want a floppy, loose noodle when you're throwing a punch, because if Oliveira's arm is floppy and loose here, none of that momentum, none of that energy gets transferred over into Dariush and then subsequently results in the knockdown. It all gets dissipated because of how the arm is flopping around. So you want a nice, rigid, nice, solid arm. You can see even right here, this muscle through the top of his forearm is flexed, trying to resist that ulnar deviation, allowing that energy to be imparted into Dariush. There's also some nice linear momentum here that we can highlight. We can see when Oliveira goes in, he is pushing forward a little bit from his lower body, so there's a little bit of linear momentum there that's carrying even more energy up into that punch. And he does a really great job of stabilizing his left side of his body here. He's not losing any extra energy by wobbling around or being mobile with this left side. Everything's nice and stable on this left side while he rotates up through with that right. I don't know how much of this is intentional when I look at what these guys do and how effective they are, but there's no doubt that all of these things come together for Oliveira to have made this an effective punch. You have to be able to establish that big long radius so that as you swing through, activate those pec muscles, bringing that arm in closer to center, you've got that big long radius that increases your angular momentum. That higher angular momentum is going to result in more energy available to be transferred out at the far end of that fist into the punch. You've got to have a nice solid arm, because if your arm is loose, if you're not isometrically activating all those muscles, meaning you're firing them and they're not changing length, you lose a lot of energy in those muscles moving after you make contact. But he keeps the arm nice and solid, allowing all that energy to be transferred out through his hand into Dariush, delivering the energy to Dariush for the knockout blow. So I hope this video was interesting. As always, you guys really seem to like these kind of knockout science, fight science videos. So hopefully we learned a little bit of a new concept here, talking about this idea of angular momentum and how it comes into play with a punch like this. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know any questions or comments down below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.